when the Ice Queen is stripped of all pretense. Pole dancing is an art. It's a conversation with your inner being, and in order to be in sync, you have to let yourself feel it and let go. Chapter 1. Dance Vortex. Dance Vortex was not your average studio. No mirrored walls filled with plies and pointed toes. No neat lines of bars pressed against polished glass. Here, steel poles rose like pillars of worship in the center of the room, while lengths of silk and cloth draped from the rafters like offerings to the gods of gravity. Even hula hoops swung lazily from hooks, ready to be spun into art. The energy of the place hit you like champagne bubbles, effervescent, alive, infectious. Children, women, men, bodies of every shape and story found themselves in motion here, discovering that dance was not merely performance, but defiance, not just art, but survival. At the very center, her domain and her throne, stood Isabella Velasquez. Or rather clung. She was a small flame of a woman, a fiery brunette with hazel eyes that sparked with a light far greater than her 5'5" frame. Now she hung inverted at the crown of the pole, her legs wrapped tight, body arcing downward in a slow, sinuous drop. Her chest curved in a graceful bow, arms outstretched as if surrendering herself to gravity, yet denying it all the same. The applause that rippled through her students was genuine, raw, hungry. Isabella slid down, all control and no accident, and landed lightly, her smile as sharp and bright as firecrackers. She waved her hand. "Your turn. Feel the pull. Trust it." They groaned, laughed, tried, failed, and tried again. Isabella's heart swelled as she circled among them, correcting a grip, steadying a trembling thigh, whispering encouragement in ears flushed with effort. This was her kingdom, her survival, her phoenix rise from broken bones and broken dreams. And though her friends called her ISY, here she was simply queen. Chapter 2. Ice and Marble. On the other side of London, the world was made of glass, marble, and steel. Solange de Cesare's heels struck the boardroom floor with a rhythm that made lesser men flinch. She did not raise her voice, she never needed to. Her silence was a blade, her stare the frostbite that made board members shuffle their notes and clear their throats like guilty schoolboys. "Marcus," she said, and the single syllable froze the air, "bring me updated data before wasting my time again." She stood, chair scraping back with military precision, and left. The echo of her steps haunted the marble corridor, her sleek frame cutting a line straight to the elevator. She was precision, order, calculation. A woman who trusted only in spreadsheets and contracts. The world bent to her because she had taught it to, which is why the flyer on the receptionist's desk should have meant nothing. Yet Solange's steps faltered. A square of glossy paper caught her eye. She lifted it, one eyebrow arching with imperial disdain, until her gaze snagged on the tagline. "Dance is a conversation. You choose how to respond." For a woman who did not do spontaneity, who mapped her days in neat calendar blocks, this was unsettling. That night, she found herself in front of her mirror, smoothing down a black dress that was neither business armor nor gala gown. It was something in between, something dangerous. By the time her driver pulled to the curb outside Dance Vortex, Solange was already furious with herself. Furious, yet compelled. And then the music began. The lights swept over poles, silk ropes, dancers moving in ways that were sensual without shame, fierce without apology. She watched, wine untouched at her side, as bodies became liquid stories in motion. And then the spotlight claimed her. Isabella Velasquez stepped into the light, hips swaying, hair a honey-brown river that caught the glow. She did not dance for the crowd. She danced as though the world did not exist. Every spin, every drop, every extension of her body was poetry written in muscle and fire. Solange's breath caught. She leaned forward without meaning to. She did not blink. She did not sip her wine. She only watched. When the set ended, Isabella hung upside down, hair brushing the floor, arms spread wide in surrender. The crowd erupted, shattering the spell. But for Solange de Cesare, something had already fractured, something she could never restore. Her life, as she knew it, was changed. Chapter 3. The Suspension. The applause faded, the music dimmed, and still Solange remained rooted to her seat. The spell should have broken when the lights rose and chatter filled the studio, but her mind refused release. Isabella's final image was seared into her, upside down, suspended in defiance of gravity, hair grazing the floor like the brush of an angel's wing, arms spread as if daring the world to cage her. It was obscene, Solange thought. Obscene, the way she, a woman like her, could be so affected by a stranger. But when she closed her eyes in the back of her car, she saw not the skyline of London, not the flashing lights of the city. She saw only Isabella's body, moving in that liquid fire, painting rebellion in the air. That night, she did not sleep. For a woman who thrived on order, sleeplessness was an unfamiliar cruelty. She turned in silk sheets, restless, hearing phantom music in the dark. Each time she closed her eyes, Isabella was there, smiling, suspended, untouchable. By dawn, Solange was furious with herself. She drowned the memory in coffee and contracts, burying herself in meetings and figures. And yet, between one signature and the next, her mind wandered. A curve of a thigh against steel. The sweep of honey-brown hair. Hazel eyes that laughed at gravity itself. Days passed, and the torment did not ease. If anything, it worsened. At night she returned, again and again, to the flyer still tucked in her desk drawer. She told herself it was research. Curiosity. A harmless diversion. But when her driver pulled up once more to the curb outside Dance Vortex, Solange knew it for what it was, obsession. She told herself she was there for the discipline of dance, for the novelty of artistry. Lies, all of them. The truth? She wanted to see Isabella move again. To feel the tether, wrap around her chest and pull, no matter how hard she fought. The second performance was worse. Or better. Or both. Solange could not decide. She watched Isabella climb, spin, fold herself into impossible shapes with the ease of someone who had mastered pain and made it beautiful. She watched her sweat gleam under the lights like a baptism. She watched, and she drowned. And again, she did not sleep. By the third night, exhaustion carved hollows beneath her eyes, but her hunger only deepened. The Ice Queen was thawing, and she despised it, even as she ached for more. The collision was inevitable. It would not be Isabella who sought her out, no. The dancer danced for herself, for art, for the freedom she had built with her own broken bones. But Solange de Cesare did not watch and wait. She was a woman who took. And so, after a week of restless nights and restless days, Solange stepped out of her car once more, flyer in hand, but this time she did not sit among the crowd. This time, she asked to see Isabella Velasquez alone. Chapter 4. Business Curiosity. The receptionist at Dance Vortex nearly dropped her pen when Solange de Cesare strode through the glass doors. This was no casual visitor, no curious onlooker. Black heels struck the floor with authority, her tailored suit sculpted perfection, her gaze glacial. "I have an appointment," Solange said smoothly, though in truth, she had made none. The receptionist's eyes darted, confused, but before she could fumble for words, a voice cut across the studio. "ISY, someone's here for you." Moments later, Isabella appeared, sweat damp from teaching, hair pulled into a messy knot that somehow made her look more dangerous, not less. She wore leggings and a loose top, her body still humming with the rhythm of movement. Solange's breath betrayed her. Just slightly, just enough for her pulse to lurch before she locked it down. "Miss." Isabella's hazel eyes flicked over her, curious, cautious. "De Cesare," Solange supplied, her tone cool, her posture impeccable. "I represent interests. Corporate partnerships, sponsorships, expansion models." The words tumbled out sharper than she intended, clinical, stripped of the truth. "I haven't slept in days because of you." Isabella tilted her head, a slow smile forming. "You came all the way down here, in heels like those, to talk spreadsheets? About pole dancing?" The tease in her voice was light, but Solange felt it as a blade. She adjusted her cufflink, avoiding the smirk tugging at Isabella's mouth. "Your business model is unusual. There's potential here." Growth, if structured properly. Isabella leaned against a pole, utterly at ease in her own space. Potential, huh? She let the word roll off her tongue like honey. You sound like every investor who's ever told me what my dream could be if I just packaged it neatly enough. Solange's mouth went dry. For the first time in years, she couldn't summon a proper retort. The woman in front of her wasn't rattled, wasn't intimidated. If anything, Isabella looked amused. I don't do neat, Isabella added, her eyes locking with hers. This place is messy, sweaty, loud, and alive. So, unless you came here to try a pole yourself, she let the sentence trail, deliberately playful, I'm not sure what you're hoping to accomplish. The Ice Queen stood silent. For once, she did not have the upper hand. And Isabella, ISY, just kept smiling, as if she had already won something neither of them had yet named. Chapter 5, The Orbit. Solange did not leave after that first awkward exchange. She told herself it was strategy, research, due diligence, anything but what it was, surrender. She returned. Again. And again. Each time she arrived at Dance Vortex, her driver's expression grew more curious, though he never dared ask. Each time, Isabella was there, spinning, teaching, laughing, radiating a kind of joy that clashed violently with Solange's world of silence and control. And each time, their words became sharper, their dance verbal instead of physical. Back again, Misty Cesare? Isabella teased one evening, looping her hair into a loose braid as the class filtered out. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were obsessed. Solange adjusted the strap of her bag, her tone crisp, too fast. I find the methodology intriguing. Discipline in unconventional forms. It could be useful in other sectors. Isabella's laugh was low, warm, maddening. Useful, huh? You make it sound like pole dancing is a line item in one of your corporate reports. It is exercise. Training. Structure, Solange countered, folding her arms, but her eyes betrayed her, strained to the curve of Isabella's shoulder, the gleam of sweat at her collarbone. Isabella mused, tilting her head. Maybe, but it's also messy. Emotional. Sometimes a little reckless. You don't seem like the reckless type. Solange's joy tightened. I don't indulge in chaos. Isabella grinned, stepping closer, not invading, not yet, but near enough for Solange to catch the faint salt of her skin. Shame. You might like it. The words hung between them, dangerous and electric. Solange swallowed hard, disguising the movement as a polite nod. Their banter became its own ritual. Isabella would prod, poke, tease, her smile quicksilver, her eyes daring. Solange would deflect, parry, retreat into logic, though her pulse betrayed her. It was a strange orbit, the dancer blazing like fire, the executive cloaked in frost. And yet, each time they circled, they pulled closer, tighter, until gravity itself began to bend. At night, Solange lay awake, their exchanges replaying like echoes. Isabella's voice followed her into dreams. Isabella's smile was the shadow she couldn't shake. And Isabella, though she never said so, had noticed the cracks. The way Solange's eyes lingered. The way her breath caught in the quiet between words. The way her mask slipped, only for a heartbeat, before she rebuilt it again. It was only a matter of time. Chapter 6, The Slip. It happened on a Thursday evening when Solange should have been locked in her office, bleeding ink over contracts. Instead, she found herself once again at Dance Vortex, watching the impossible curve of Isabella's body against the steel. This time, Isabella dismissed her class early, leaving the studio quiet except for the faint hum of music still playing low from the speakers. She toweled her face, looked up, and caught Solange's gaze across the room. "You're here again," Isabella said, walking toward her with unhurried steps. Her voice was playful, but her eyes were sharp, searching. "You must really love my spreadsheets." Solange opened her mouth, ready with some polished retort, some dismissive line. But instead, something else slipped out. "I love watching you dance." The words hung in the air, stark, dangerous, true. For the first time since their orbit began, Solange faltered. Her lips parted as if to amend, to correct, but no words followed. Isabella stopped, tilting her head, and a slow smile crept across her face. "Well," she said softly, almost a whisper but carrying through the empty studio, "finally, some honesty." Solange's throat tightened. She should have looked away, should have buried herself in frost again, but her gaze remained locked on Isabella, helpless, hungry. Then Isabella leaned against the pole, casual as a queen on her throne. "Tell you what, Miss de Cesare. Why don't you come in one evening for a private session? Just you. No distractions. I'll show you what pole dancing really feels like." The air between them thickened, the invitation unmistakably double-edged. Solange's pulse pounded in her ears. For a moment, she almost said yes, almost surrendered to the gravity dragging her down. But the Ice Queen was not built for surrender. Not yet. "That won't be necessary," she said finally, her tone sharp, almost clipped. "I don't indulge in personal diversions." Isabella arched a brow, unconvinced, her smirk as wicked as sin. If you say so." But as Solange turned to leave, her heels clicking against the floor, she could feel Isabella's gaze burning into her back, searing, relentless, a promise of fire yet to come. And that night, Solange did not sleep. Not even for a moment. Chapter 7. The Torment. Solange did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark of her penthouse, staring up at the ceiling, the shadows of the city flickering through the glass. But it was not the city that consumed her. It was the memory of Isabella's voice, low, sultry, teasing with that wicked smile. "Why don't you come in for a private session?" The words echoed in Solange's mind, haunting her, twisting and turning, as if they were an invitation to a world she could never truly enter. She told herself it was ridiculous. She told herself she was in control, that this was just another game. Isabella was a dancer, a woman fascinating, yes, but nothing more than that. Just a momentary distraction. And yet, the memory of Isabella's body, fluid and defiant, continued to twist inside her like a drug. The sway of her hips, the confidence in her every movement, the power she wielded without even trying. Solange reached for her phone on the nightstand, staring at the screen as if the very act of pressing a button would dissolve the tension that had taken root in her chest. She scrolled through emails, responded to a few messages, anything to push away the images of Isabella dancing, of their exchange, of her own weakness in the face of it all. But there was no escaping it. The memory of Isabella's eyes on her, the way she saw through her, how she made Solange feel, not powerful, not in control, but vulnerable. A weakness that Solange had not allowed herself in years. The next morning, she threw herself into her work, letting her emails and meetings blur together into a haze. The hours passed like minutes. But the thought of Dance Vortex, of Isabella, lingered in the background, gnawing at the edge of her focus, always there, always waiting. She called her assistant twice, made a series of appointments with clients she barely knew, and threw herself into the chaos of spreadsheets, numbers, and deadlines. Anything to fill the silence. But when her gaze wandered to the clock, she realized something. It was the same time. The same hour she had visited Dance Vortex the week before. The same hour when Isabella had asked her for the private session. The same hour when the air had thickened with an invitation she had almost accepted. And now, in the quiet of her office, she could not ignore the tug, the pull, the itch beneath her skin. Solange closed her eyes, leaning back in her chair. She saw Isabella's smile again, the way her body had moved with such ease and grace, as if the world had no weight for her, as if she existed only in that moment, untouchable, burning. Before she realized it, Solange was dialing her phone, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. The number she knew by heart. The number that had been tucked away in the corner of her mind since the night Isabella had given her that invitation. The phone rang, and then it stopped. A voice, warm, low, dangerous. "Hello, Miss de Cesare." It was as if Isabella had been expecting this moment all along. Solange cleared her throat, trying to steady herself. I'm considering your offer," she said, her voice steady but unsure. Isabella's laugh was a soft, knowing thing, dripping with honey. "I thought you might. When would you like to come in?" Solange closed her eyes, feeling her walls crack just a little bit more. Tonight. There was a long pause, a beat of silence, before Isabella spoke again, her voice almost predatory. I'll be waiting. And with that, Solange hung up the phone. The phone felt heavier than it ever had. Solange sat back, staring at the screen, but seeing nothing. Her breath quickened as her pulse raced beneath her skin. She had made her choice. And there would be no turning back now. Chapter 8. The Private Session. Solange arrived early, her pulse already pounding, a chaotic rhythm beneath the mask of calm she wore. She stood outside the doors of Dance Vortex, her heels silent on the polished floor as she stared at the glowing sign. The world outside was cold, distant, controlled, but in here, she knew it would be different. She was here for a session. A private session. But even as she tried to steel herself, she knew it was never going to be about the pole. It was about her. About them. About everything she'd been trying to avoid. The receptionist smiled at her as she walked in but didn't ask any questions. Solange was no stranger here. Isabella appeared from the back, wiping her hands with a towel, her hair tumbling over her shoulder in soft waves. She wore tight leggings, a tank top that clung to her like it belonged, and a grace in her every step that sent a jolt of heat through Solange's chest. Right on time, Isabella said, voice dripping with amusement, though there was something darker there, something knowing. Solange stood a little straighter, trying to hold on to her usual composure. I was never late for business, she replied, though her voice felt like it was coming from a place far away. Isabella grinned, a slow, seductive curl of the lips. I like that. But tonight, we're not doing business, are we? Solange swallowed, the words thick in her throat. No. Isabella led her toward the center of the studio, where the poles rose like giants, the air heavy with energy. She moved effortlessly, gliding with such fluidity that Solange couldn't help but watch, transfixed. Let's start slow, Isabella said, and though the words were directed at her, the heat in Isabella's eyes spoke a different language. She stepped behind Solange, close enough for Solange to feel the warmth of her body, the tension in the air. Take a deep breath. Let it out slow. Solange did as she was told, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of her breath, but her heart beat louder in her ears, each pulse filled with a hunger she couldn't ignore. Isabella's hands brushed her shoulders gently, adjusting her posture, guiding her movements as though she were a marionette. Solange could feel the heat of her touch linger, the softness of her hands sending shocks of awareness through her body. You're so stiff, Isabella murmured, her lips almost touching Solange's ear. This isn't about control, Solange. Let go. Her words were like a command, a low whisper that made something inside Solange snap. The Ice Queen had been careful, had been perfect, too perfect. But here, in the shadows of the studio, with Isabella so close, it all felt like it was falling apart. I don't know how, Solange admitted before she could stop herself. The words were out before she could hide them, raw and vulnerable, a crack in her armor she couldn't seal fast enough. Isabella's fingers traced the line of her jaw, turning her face slowly. Solange's eyes flickered to Isabella's lips, just inches away. The tension between them was unbearable now. Let me teach you, Isabella said, and before Solange could protest, Isabella's lips brushed against her ear, the softest of touches, enough to set fire to her blood. I'll show you what it feels like to be free, Solange. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. Isabella stepped back then, her hands never leaving Solange's body, guiding her in small, slow motions. Every twist, every shift, brought them closer until Solange could feel the heat of Isabella's body against her back, the warmth of her breath against her neck. Solange's heart was racing, but her body responded before her mind could catch up. Her hands gripped the pole, her legs trembling with the unfamiliar movements, her every instinct at war with everything she had ever known. And then, as if Isabella had been waiting for that one moment, she pressed in close, her lips brushing against Solange's cheek, then her ear, then her neck. Let go, Isabella whispered, and this time, it wasn't a command. It was a plea. Solange's breath hitched. Every cell in her body screamed at her to step away, to run, to flee from this desire, this fire she couldn't control. But the more she tried to resist, the more she wanted to fall into it. And so, without a word, she let go. Her body swayed with the music, a fluid movement she'd never allowed herself before. She let her guard down, let the heat of Isabella's presence wash over her like a storm, and for the first time in years, she felt alive. Isabella was watching her closely now, her eyes dark and hungry, but there was no judgment, no control, only the raw, primal connection between them. When Solange spun to face her, the last of her restraint vanished. Isabella's lips brushed against hers, teasing, taunting, but never fully touching. And in that moment, Solange knew this was the moment she had been running from. The moment the Ice Queen finally melted. Chapter 9. The Dance. Isabella stepped back, her eyes flickering with something like satisfaction, watching Solange's every breath, every tiny movement. The air between them was thick, charged. There was no denying it now. They weren't just here for the pole. They were here for something far more dangerous. "Before you can dance," Isabella said softly, her voice cool but laced with something darker, something knowing, "you have to let go." Solange's pulse raced at the words. She stood there, frozen, caught between the control she clung to and the wild, uncharted pull of desire that threatened to undo everything. She had always been so precise, so perfect. But here, in this space, in this moment, her body was telling her to let go, to surrender. "You need to feel the pull, not control it," Isabella continued, walking around Solange like a predator circling its prey. Her eyes were intent, studying Solange's every inch, and with each step, the tension tightened. "The pull isn't a thing to fight. It's a thing to move with, to trust." Solange swallowed hard, her breath hitching. She wanted to resist, wanted to prove that she could maintain her usual perfection. But Isabella was right. Her every instinct screamed to just let go, to allow herself to feel the rhythm of her body, the pulse of the moment. She had spent so long keeping control. But this was different. This was dangerous. This was the edge. Isabella was standing so close now, her breath warm against Solange's skin. "I'll guide you," she whispered, her voice rough with that same hunger that had been building since their first meeting. "But you have to trust me. Let go, and I'll show you how to move with the rhythm." The words should have scared Solange. They should have felt like a trap. But instead, they felt like a promise, a dangerous, intoxicating promise. Isabella's hands gently cupped Solange's waist, her touch sending a jolt through her. "Hold on to the pole," she instructed, her voice steady. "But feel your body, not just your grip." Solange did as she was told, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around the cold steel. But her body was a different story. It ached for release, for that moment where she could forget the rules, forget everything she had ever known. Isabella's fingers brushed the back of Solange's neck, pulling her closer. "Let it go," she murmured. "Feel the power of your own body. Let it move, let it speak." And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Isabella guided Solange into the first movement. The pole, once an object of control, became something alive in her hands, her body moving, responding, yielding. Every twist, every turn, every extension of her limbs was a new revelation. It was as if she was discovering a part of herself she had locked away for years. But Isabella didn't stop there. She pushed, she coaxed, she whispered. "Now, let the rhythm take you. Follow it. Don't think. Just be." Solange felt it, felt the heat surge through her veins, felt her body become a conduit for the dance. She wasn't just holding onto the pole anymore, she was becoming it. Her movements were fluid, sensual, raw. She spun with it, her body responding without thought, without hesitation. And through it all, Isabella watched her, every shift of Solange's body, every breath, every movement. She moved with her, guiding, pushing, until the heat between them was unbearable, a fire that threatened to burn them both. "You're beautiful," Isabella whispered, stepping closer, her lips brushing Solange's ear. "Now, move with me. Let go, Solange. Let me in. It was too much, too fast. Solange felt her control slip, the walls she had so carefully built crumbling. The heat of Isabella's body was too close now, her touch too intimate. And when Solange's body finally collapsed against the pole in exhaustion, Isabella was there, pressing close, her lips brushing the side of Solange's neck. The heat was searing, a wildfire that no amount of control could extinguish. Solange gasped, her chest heaving, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She was lost in the moment, caught between fire and surrender, and the only thing she knew was the heat of Isabella's skin against hers, the pressure of her body, the truth in her touch. "You're not just a dancer," Solange said, breathless. You're fire." Isabella's lips curved into a smile, wicked and satisfied. "You're not so cold yourself," she said softly, as she leaned in, brushing her lips against Solange's jawline. And then, in that heat, in that moment, it was clear, Solange was no longer the Ice Queen. She was simply Solange. Chapter 10: The Fire. Isabella's hands moved slowly over Solange's back, tracing the lines of her spine, the curve of her waist. Solange was still trembling, the aftershocks of their dance rattling her bones, her body impossibly alive in a way it had never been before. She wanted to step back, to breathe, to recover, but Isabella's touch was like fire itself, her fingers leaving trails of heat wherever they landed. "You're still holding back," Isabella whispered, her voice low, smoky, like velvet dipped in honey. Her breath was warm against Solange's ear, making her pulse spike. "I know you can feel it. Don't fight it." Solange's chest rose and fell with each ragged breath. "I'm not used to this." Isabella's lips curled into a smile. "I know, but you will be." She stepped away, pulling Solange with her, guiding her to the center of the studio. The lights were low, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The air between them was thick with tension, but there was something else now, something raw desire. "This time," Isabella said, her eyes dark with intent, "you're going to let go fully. Not just with the dance, but with everything. This is more than a pole, more than a dance. This is you in your purest form." Solange nodded, though she didn't fully understand what Isabella meant. But she didn't question it. She couldn't. All she knew was that she was standing here, caught between a desire she couldn't name and a woman who was unleashing something inside her that had been buried for far too long. Isabella moved closer again, her hands smoothing over Solange's hips, guiding her to face the pole. The air was thick with electricity, the tension between them palpable. Solange's heart was racing. She had never been so exposed. And yet, she could feel the pull of Isabella's touch, like gravity. She couldn't escape it. Isabella pressed her body against Solange's back, her chest flush with Solange's. "Relax," she whispered, her voice a seductive command. "Feel it. Let the rhythm take you." And then, without warning, she moved Solange's body into position. The pole was cool against her skin, but Solange's body was on fire. Isabella's hands were gentle, guiding, but there was an intensity to her touch that made Solange feel seen, as if Isabella were peeling away the layers of her carefully constructed walls. When Solange gripped the pole again, her movements were different. There was no stiffness, no hesitation. She flowed, moving as one with the music, the rhythm. She twisted and spun, her body obeying the call of the pole, but it was more than that. She felt it, the heat, the power, the release. Isabella stepped back, watching her, her gaze dark, intense, like she was watching a flame burn out of control. "You're beautiful," she murmured, her voice thick with admiration. Solange's breath hitched at the words. She had never been told that beautiful, like that, not with this raw intensity, this depth. The fire that burned between them now was not just physical. It was emotional, it was undeniable, it was real. And when Solange spun, her body arcing through the air, her legs wrapping around the pole with fluid ease, Isabella moved closer, her hands sliding over Solange's skin once more, this time slower, deliberate. Her fingers traced the curve of Solange's body, sliding over her waist, her ribs, before locking onto her shoulders and pulling her down for a kiss. It was soft at first, tender, almost tentative. But then the heat between them sparked, and the kiss became something more, a hungry, desperate meeting of lips and breath. Solange kissed her back, her hands reaching for Isabella, her body pressed into hers, desperate for more. Isabella's hands moved lower, her touch becoming bolder, more urgent. Solange gasped as she felt Isabella's fingers skim the edge of her top, pulling it up, revealing the soft skin beneath. Her pulse was wild now, each beat a drum in her ears. Isabella. Solange's voice trembled as she pulled away, gasping for breath. Shh. Isabella cut her off, her lips finding Solange's neck, kissing, nipping, and sending shivers through her. You don't have to say anything. But Solange did, she had to. The fire inside her couldn't be contained anymore. It was raging, consuming, and the need to feel, to give, it was too much to bear. I don't know what I'm doing, Solange whispered, her voice shaky, her hands trembling as they reached for Isabella, but Isabella only smiled. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do, Isabella whispered back, her fingers tracing the line of Solange's jaw, her lips pressing once more against Solange's, but this time, there was no hesitation. There was no retreat. They were both fire. And it was burning them alive. Chapter 11. The Return. Solange tried to return to her life. She had to. The following days were a blur of meetings, deals, and emails, everything she had always controlled, everything she had built around herself to maintain distance, to maintain order. She immersed herself in her work, determined to keep the fire she had felt in Dance Vortex locked away. She should have been relieved. But something was different. The city felt colder. Her office sterile. The contracts, the figures, the spreadsheets, all of it felt like noise, distant, irrelevant. She couldn't focus. The words on the screen blurred, her mind wandering back to that moment, the kiss, the heat, the way Isabella's body had melted her resolve. She had never been one for distractions. But Isabella was now the loudest thought in her mind, the one thing she couldn't push aside. Solange stared out the window of her penthouse that night, the city lights flickering like stars against the dark sky, but all she saw was Isabella's face. Her smile. Her touch. The heat between them. It was like a fever, one she couldn't shake. She reached for her phone, her fingers brushing the screen, but she paused. She could call. She could see her again. But why? What was this? Was it just the dance? Just the physicality of it? She didn't need the distraction. She didn't need to lose control. But the thought of Isabella's eyes on her, the feel of her body pressed against hers, the way she had shown Solange how to let go, it was too much. Too good. The next evening, Solange found herself walking through the same door of Dance Vortex. She wasn't sure why she had come back. It wasn't for the dance anymore, it couldn't be. It wasn't just the pole. It was Isabella. Isabella was there, of course, as if she had known Solange would return. The moment their eyes met, Solange felt the fire stir once more. Isabella was teaching a class, but she looked up and smiled when she saw Solange. The smile was subtle, yet knowing, as if she had been waiting. Back again. Isabella's voice was low, teasing, but there was an edge to it now, something deeper, darker. Solange stood at the edge of the studio, her heart beating a little faster. I thought I could use another session. Isabella didn't respond right away. She simply watched her, a glint of something dangerous in her eyes. You don't have to come back for the dance, you know. Solange raised an eyebrow. Oh. Isabella moved toward her slowly, her hips swaying in a way that made Solange's breath hitch. You're here for more than that. Solange's mouth went dry. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck. Instead, she simply nodded. Isabella stopped in front of her, close enough for Solange to feel the heat radiating from her body. The tension between them was palpable now, thick and unrelenting. Are you ready to let go? Isabella asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through Solange's resistance like a knife. Solange's heart pounded in her chest. Her usual control was slipping again, but she held it barely. I'm not sure I can, she said, her voice betraying her, filled with the vulnerability she never allowed anyone to see. Isabella's smile widened, as if she had won something. "You'll learn," she said softly, her fingers brushing Solange's arm. "I won't let you hide anymore." It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a request. It was a promise. Solange's breath hitched again, and her mind screamed to step back, to leave. But her body was already leaning in, already surrendering. She didn't know how much longer she could resist. Chapter 12. The Surrender. The studio was quiet when Solange entered, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she made her way to the center. The smell of sweat and determination lingered in the air, the remnants of a long day of practice. The lights were dimmer now, casting shadows that made the space feel intimate, almost private. And then, she saw Isabella, her figure lit by the soft glow of the lights, leaning against one of the poles, her posture confident, her expression unreadable. When her eyes met Solange's, a slow, knowing smile spread across her lips. "You came back," Isabella said, her voice rich with that same dark hunger that had lived between them from the first moment. Solange could feel the heat crawling up her spine, the tension building once again. She tried to keep her composure, but it was slipping faster than she could catch it. "I didn't come back for the pole," Solange said, her voice steady, but there was an edge to it now, uncertain, yet hungry. Isabella pushed off the pole with a fluid grace, taking slow, deliberate steps toward her. "No," she murmured, her voice a tantalizing whisper. "You came back for me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and it hung between them like a challenge. Solange swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment. The space between them was closing, but her mind still screamed for control. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to hold on to her logic, her reason. But when Isabella stepped into her space, that argument melted away like ice in the heat of summer. "Why?" Solange whispered, her breath uneven. "Why are you doing this to me?" Isabella stopped just inches away from her, close enough for Solange to feel the warmth radiating from her body. The distance was small, so small that Solange could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. "Because you need to be free," Isabella replied softly, her fingers brushing against Solange's cheek, just barely. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her, and her heart skipped a beat. "You're trapped in your own cage, and I'm the key." Solange trembled at the words, but still, she couldn't let herself break. She couldn't just give in, not without understanding why it felt so right, so necessary. Isabella's hand slid down Solange's neck, lingering just below her jawline, her thumb tracing the soft curve of Solange's throat. "Let go, Solange. Let me in." Solange closed her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips. She felt the weight of Isabella's touch like an anchor, pulling her deeper, dragging her to the edge of something she had never let herself experience before. When Solange opened her eyes again, she could see the flicker of desire in Isabella's gaze, a fire mirrored in her own soul. They were both burning. And then, without thinking, without hesitation, Solange reached up, her fingers finding the back of Isabella's neck, pulling her in with a sudden, desperate urgency. Their lips met in a collision of heat, the kiss hungry and raw, as if they had both been waiting for this moment to finally ignite. Isabella's hands were everywhere now, on her back, her waist, pulling Solange closer, deeper. There was no grace now. No elegance. Just the need to feel, to taste, to consume. Solange gave herself up to the kiss, allowing herself to melt into Isabella's touch, into the fire that had been simmering between them for so long. Solange's breath came in short gasps, her hands shaking as she tugged at Isabella's shirt, wanting more, wanting everything. Isabella let her, helping Solange pull it off, her lips never leaving hers. "Isabella," Solange gasped, her voice a ragged whisper, "I can't." But Isabella didn't let her finish. Instead, she kissed her harder, her hands moving to Solange's hips, urging her closer. Their bodies were pressed together now, every inch of space between them consumed by the fire that was building. Isabella's hands slid lower, and Solange gasped as she felt the heat of Isabella's touch against her skin, burning through the fabric of her clothes. She couldn't think anymore. The fire was too strong, too overwhelming. Let go, Isabella whispered against her lips, her voice thick with desire. Let go of everything. Just feel me. Solange closed her eyes, her head spinning. There was no thought anymore, no resistance. Just the heat of Isabella's body against hers, the pulse of their hearts racing in sync. With one swift movement, Isabella guided her toward the pole. Solange's back hit it softly, but the moment the pole made contact, a spark shot through her, a fire igniting in her blood. Isabella's hands were on her again, this time more possessive, more urgent. She could feel Isabella's breath against her neck, the press of her body against hers, and it felt like everything she had ever needed, every craving, every desire she had tried to suppress. Don't hold back, Isabella whispered. Let go, Solange. Let me have you. And Solange did. She didn't fight it. She didn't hold back. She surrendered completely, her body responding to the rhythm of the moment, to the fire between them, to the need that had been building since the moment they had first met. When their bodies finally collided, it was a force of nature. A wild, consuming force that swept them both into the storm. And there was no going back. Chapter 13, The Unspoken. The studio was silent now, save for the soft sound of their breathing. The world outside seemed distant, irrelevant. It was just them, two bodies still tangled in the aftermath of their fire, still burning, but now the flames had cooled, leaving only embers. Solange's heart was still racing, but the urgency was gone. She rested her forehead against Isabella's, their bodies pressed together, the heat of their shared passion still warming her skin. The world felt softer now, quieter. But there was something heavier too. Something real. Isabella's fingers gently traced the curve of Solange's jaw as they both caught their breath. I never thought you'd be the one to let go, Isabella said softly, her voice quieter now, as if she were still in awe of what had just happened. Solange swallowed, her chest still tight with a mix of emotions. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, but she couldn't deny what she had just allowed herself to feel. I didn't think I could either, she admitted, her voice hushed. But you made me. Isabella's eyes softened, her fingers lingering at Solange's skin. I didn't make you, Solange. You chose to let go. I just helped you realize you didn't have to control everything. Solange closed her eyes for a moment, leaning into the touch. The words hung in the air like a soft, fragile thread. She had always been in control, had always believed that was what kept her safe, kept her powerful. But now, in the quiet after the storm, she wasn't so sure anymore. I've spent my whole life trying to keep everything together, Solange said, her voice low. I never let myself feel anything too deeply. It was easier to manage everything than to let it all unravel. Isabella's lips brushed against her forehead, gentle and tender. You're not alone in that, you know. I've spent my own years trying to keep my walls up too. But we're both here now, aren't we? Solange nodded, her breath shaky. There was something vulnerable in Isabella's voice, something that made Solange feel seen, not just as the powerful, controlled woman she usually showed to the world, but as someone who was allowed to be human. What does this mean? Solange asked, her words hesitant, but there was an honesty in them she had never allowed herself before. What happens next for us? Isabella's gaze was steady, and for the first time, it wasn't filled with the heat of desire, it was soft, reflective. What do you want to happen next? Solange opened her mouth, but the words got stuck, caught in the space between what she wanted and what she was afraid to ask for. She could feel her heart beating harder, the vulnerability of the moment too much for her to hide. I don't know what I'm doing here with you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know that I don't want to let go of this. She gestured between them, her hand trembling slightly. I can't pretend I'm not drawn to you. But I also know that this, whatever this is, it's dangerous for me. Isabella took a step back, just enough to look at her fully, her expression unreadable. But there was no judgment in her eyes, only understanding. You're scared, she said softly. And that's okay. But I won't ask you to give up what you need to hold on to. Solange met her gaze, the weight of the words sinking into her chest. But I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to walk this line. Isabella took a deep breath, her hand reaching out to gently touch Solange's cheek. You don't have to know right now. Let's just take it one day at a time, no expectations, no pressure. We've already crossed the line. Now, we figure out where we go from here, together. Solange's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the truth of Isabella's words resonating deep within her. Maybe she didn't have to have all the answers. Maybe she didn't need to control everything. Maybe she could just let herself feel. I'm scared, Solange admitted again, this time the words easier, softer. But I think I'm ready to find out what's next. Isabella smiled, a slow, gentle curve of her lips that held more promise than anything they had said. Then let's start with today, she whispered. Let's just be here. Together. And for the first time in a long time, Solange allowed herself to simply breathe, to feel the warmth of Isabella's presence beside her, without needing to figure out the future. Maybe, for once, she didn't need all the answers. Maybe just being in the moment was enough. And maybe, just maybe, she would learn that she could be more than the Ice Queen. She could be something else, something real. Chapter 14, In Sync. The night of the show arrived like a storm, electric, alive with energy, the buzz of anticipation humming through the air. The studio was filled with dancers preparing backstage, the faint smell of sweat and perfume mixing with the excitement that thrummed in the air. Solange had never been to one of the shows at Dance Vortex before, but tonight, she wasn't just an observer. Tonight, she was part of it. She had spent hours getting ready, pulling her hair into an intricate, messy updo, her makeup bold, but not too much, just enough to highlight the fire in her eyes. But she wasn't just here to be seen. She was here to dance. As she stood backstage, waiting for her turn, she felt the weight of Isabella's gaze on her. The moment they had shared earlier that day was still fresh, the quiet honesty of their words lingering in her chest. But now, with the music pulsing from the main stage, all that mattered was the rhythm, the movement, and the connection they would share on that stage. Isabella appeared beside her, her own outfit sleek and simple, black leggings and a silver top that caught the light as she moved. She was a vision of grace and power, a quiet storm waiting to be unleashed. Her eyes found Solange's, and for a moment, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Are you ready? Isabella asked, her voice low, almost intimate, as she stepped closer, her fingers brushing against Solange's arm. Solange's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from excitement. This was a different kind of energy. I'm ready. She said it with more certainty than she felt, but as the music began to rise in the distance, she felt something shift inside her. The moment was here. They were here. As the crowd cheered, the lights dimmed, and the spotlight hit the center of the stage. Solange stepped out, her heart racing with every step, the weight of all eyes on her. Isabella followed, her presence commanding, effortless. They met in the center of the stage, the music flowing around them like a current. The first notes rang out, a slow, sultry beat that swirled in the air, and they began to move together. The first few steps were tentative, a brief moment of uncertainty as they found their rhythm. But soon, it was clear they were in sync. Isabella's movements were fluid, graceful, sensual, and Solange mirrored every motion, every twist, every turn with a natural ease she never knew she had. There was no thinking, no hesitation. They moved together like they had danced in this way for years, their bodies seamlessly responding to the same pulse, the same fire. As they spun, twirled, and slid against each other, the crowd seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, their bodies locked in perfect harmony, a dance of passion, trust, and freedom. Solange felt it, then, the release. The surrender that had once terrified her now felt like second nature. There were no walls, no rules, just the rhythm of their bodies and the pull of the music. And Isabella was there, every step of the way. Her eyes locked on Solange's, the connection between them so palpable it almost seemed to crackle in the air. They moved as if they had always been in perfect harmony, their chemistry undeniable. With each twist of her body, Solange felt more alive than she ever had before. The stage, the crowd, the music, it all faded into the background as she focused on the woman in front of her. Isabella's touch was a guiding force, a steady presence that kept her grounded even as they spun faster, higher, the energy between them reaching a fever pitch. And when the music swelled to its peak, they were perfectly synchronized, their bodies colliding in a final, breathtaking moment. Solange's heart skipped a beat as she felt the pull of Isabella's body against hers, the final moment of the dance building to a crescendo. She was dizzy with it, lost in the movement, the sensation, the connection. It was like nothing she had ever felt before. The music slowed, the final notes ringing through the studio, and they ended in the most perfect stillness, their bodies pressed close, breathing in unison. The audience erupted in applause, the sound deafening, but for Solange and Isabella, there was only the beat of their hearts. Isabella's hands gently cupped Solange's face, her thumb brushing over her lips, and for a moment, they stood there, still in the embrace of the dance. "You're incredible," Isabella whispered, her voice filled with awe, but Solange only smiled, her chest rising and falling with the intensity of the moment. "I couldn't have done it without you," Solange replied, her voice breathless, filled with gratitude. Isabella's smile was soft, genuine, and the look in her eyes spoke of something deeper, something that had nothing to do with the stage, but everything to do with the two of them. "We're a team," she said, her voice low and full of promise. The audience's cheers slowly faded into the background as the two of them stood there, together, perfectly in sync, on the stage, in their hearts and in this moment. Chapter 15: The Aftermath and the Future. The lights had faded, the last echoes of applause still vibrating in the air, but in the quiet aftermath of the performance, everything felt different. Solange stood backstage, her body still buzzing with the energy of the performance, but it was more than that. The heat between her and Isabella lingered in every touch, every glance. There was no denying it now, what they had was more than just a fiery attraction. It was something deeper, something that had shifted them both in ways they hadn't expected. She found Isabella near the dressing rooms, leaning casually against the wall, her eyes already searching for her. When their gazes met, it was as if the world outside didn't exist. There was only the two of them. "You were incredible," Isabella said, her voice low and warm, her smile never leaving her lips. She moved toward Solange, her presence magnetic, impossible to ignore. Solange smiled, a little breathless, still trying to come to terms with the fact that she had just danced like that freely, without inhibition, perfectly in sync with someone else. She had never felt so alive in her life. "Couldn't have done it without you," Solange replied, her voice a little shaky, but there was a sincerity in it. She reached out, taking Isabella's hand. The connection between them was stronger than anything she had ever known. Isabella's fingers intertwined with hers, and for a moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of their shared experience settling around them. It was as if everything they had done, every choice they had made, had led to this moment, this quiet understanding between them. "You're ready for more, Solange," Isabella said softly, her voice almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. "You're ready to step into something bigger, and I'm right here with you." Solange turned to face her, her heart still racing, but this time for a different reason. "What do you mean?" Isabella's gaze was steady, but there was a spark of something new in her eyes, something that spoke of ambition, of growth, of dreams beyond the studio. "This place, Dance Vortex, it's growing. But we need to expand, reach more people, make this bigger. We've created something incredible here, Solange. Something real. And I want to build it with you." Solange's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. The idea of expanding, of creating something even more powerful than what they already had, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. But when she looked at Isabella, she saw the same fire that had burned in her from the very beginning. They were both ready to push beyond their limits. "I'm with you," Solange said, her voice unwavering. "Let's do it. Let's make this bigger." Isabella smiled, and the warmth in her eyes lit up the entire room. "Together," she said, and Solange felt a thrill run through her. The days that followed were a blur of excitement and possibility. They met with investors, scouted new locations, discussed designs for a larger studio that would offer everything Dance Vortex had, and more. Solange found herself more energized than she had been in years, swept up in the momentum of something new. Isabella had a vision, a dream that stretched far beyond the walls of their current space, and Solange was ready to follow her, ready to build something lasting. They found the perfect location, an old building with high ceilings and an open floor plan, a blank canvas for them to create their vision. There would be more poles, more ropes, more space for people to move and express themselves, just like they had done. The new studio would include classes for all skill levels, with a focus on fitness, art, and freedom. They wanted to build a place where everyone could feel the way they had felt on stage, free, alive, and in perfect sync. And through it all, Solange and Isabella were constantly by each other's side, pushing each other to dream bigger, to reach higher. Their connection grew deeper every day, their partnership blossoming not just in business, but in life. They were no longer just two women who had come together for a dance. They were a team, building something far greater than either of them could have imagined on their own. The opening night of the new dance Vortex was a celebration of their hard work, their passion, and their love. The studio was packed, the air thick with anticipation as dancers of all ages and skill levels filled the space. The energy was electric, the music loud, and Solange couldn't help but smile as she looked at Isabella across the room. They had done it. They had built something beautiful together. Isabella stepped up beside her, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it," she whispered, her hand brushing Solange's. Solange nodded, her heart full. Together. The music began, and they danced. Not just on the floor, but through the world they had created together. And in that moment, everything felt right. They were exactly where they were supposed to be. Chapter 16. The Dance of Us. The days blurred into each other, filled with meetings, designs, renovations, and the endless tasks that came with the expansion of Dance Vortex. But amidst the whirlwind of excitement, there was something else, something deeper, an undercurrent between them that neither could ignore. Solange was more energized than she had been in years, driven by the vision of what they were building together. But in the quiet moments, when the work slowed down and the dust settled, she found herself searching for something more, something between them that was still growing, still shifting. Isabella was the fire, the driving force, the one who made everything feel possible. Her passion was contagious, her vision unwavering, and yet Solange could see the toll it was taking on her. The late nights, the constant pressure of building something big and bold, it was starting to weigh on Isabella, and Solange could feel it. One evening, as they sat at the office, a stack of papers between them, Solange noticed the way Isabella's shoulders were slumped, the dark circles under her eyes. The energy that usually radiated from her was dimmed, just a little, and it made Solange's heart tighten. "You okay?" Solange asked softly, pushing the papers aside, her fingers brushing against Isabella's hand. Isabella didn't meet her gaze immediately. Instead, she stared at the papers, the weight of them pressing down on her. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Solange frowned, reaching for Isabella's other hand, pulling it gently into her own. "You're not fine, Isabella." Isabella sighed, looking up at her with a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "I'm just overwhelmed, I guess. There's so much to do, and it feels like we're always chasing the next thing. I don't want to fail you. I don't want to fail this." Solange squeezed her hand, her heart aching at the honesty in Isabella's voice. She had always been the strong one, the one who carried the weight, but Solange could see the cracks now. She could see the human beneath the fire. "You won't fail me," Solange said firmly. "And you won't fail this. We're doing this together. You don't have to carry it all on your own." Isabella's gaze softened, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "But it's not just about the studio, Solange. It's about everything. You, me, us. I'm afraid if I keep pushing, I'm going to lose sight of what we have." Solange's breath caught. She hadn't expected Isabella to voice that fear, but now that it was out in the open, she felt it, too, the fear of losing themselves in the midst of the dream they were building. "We won't lose each other," Solange said, her voice steady. "But we have to remember to slow down. We've always pushed each other to be more, to be better. But I want to make sure we're still dancing together, really dancing, not just chasing the next goal." Isabella smiled softly, her fingers tightening around Solange's. You're right. I don't want to disappoint you. You never could, Solange replied, her voice full of warmth and certainty. But we need to take time for us too. Not just for the studio. For what we're building together. For this, she placed a hand over her heart, a soft, intimate gesture. For us. Isabella's smile widened, and for a moment, the tension between them melted away. You're right, she murmured. I've been so focused on the future, I forgot about the present. Solange leaned in, pressing her lips to Isabella's forehead in a soft, loving kiss. We're in this together. Now and always. The next few weeks were a delicate balance. They made a pact to take time for each other, to set aside space where their connection wasn't just about business or the studio. They began taking walks in the evenings, grabbing dinner at their favorite spots, and stealing moments when they could just be together, without the weight of the world pressing down on them. And in those moments, the bond between them deepened. They shared more than just their dreams for the studio. They shared their fears, their hopes, and the quiet moments when the world felt still. One evening, after a long day of meetings and design consultations, Solange found herself standing in front of Isabella, a gentle smile on her lips. She reached for her hand, and they stepped outside into the warm night air. Let's dance, Solange said, her voice soft, her gaze steady. Just you and me. No stage, no audience. Just us. Isabella's eyes sparkled with surprise, then something more, a warmth, an understanding. You mean it? I mean it, Solange said, her voice full of certainty. Let's take a break from everything else and just dance. Let's remember what it feels like to be in sync, just us. And so, they're in the quiet of the night, with nothing but the stars above and the soft rhythm of the world around them. They danced. Their bodies moved together like they always had, perfectly in sync, no words needed, just the quiet, powerful connection that had brought them together from the very beginning. The world may have been changing, but in this moment, it was just them, two souls intertwined, perfectly aligned. They were building something together, not just a studio, not just a business, but something more, something real. They were dancing through life, together, with no fear of what came next, because they knew they had each other. Epilogue, Fire and Ice. The years would blur in memory, but one thing never faded: the night they first danced. That moment when an ice queen, cloaked in marble and control, locked eyes with a fiery pole dancer who had rebuilt her world from ashes. That was where it began. What followed was not easy. There were fights, late nights, too many moments where ambition threatened to swallow them whole. Solange's instinct was always to build walls, Isabella's was always to burn through them. But somehow, they found the rhythm between them, the give and the take, the silence and the fire, the push and the surrender. Dance Vortex became more than a studio. It became a movement. The expansion spread across the city, then across borders. A sanctuary where bodies could move freely, where art and survival became one, where sweat became poetry. And at the heart of it all, two women, perfectly in sync. On the night of the grand opening of their newest studio, Bright Lights, a crowd buzzing with expectation, Solange and Isabella stood hand in hand, watching dancers take the stage. The applause was thunderous, the music wild, and in that moment, Solange leaned close, her lips brushing Isabella's ear. Look at what we've built, she whispered, her voice low but filled with awe. Isabella smiled, her eyes shining. We didn't just build a studio. We built us. Later, when the crowd had gone and the lights had dimmed, they found themselves alone on the floor once more. No stage, no audience, just the echo of their footsteps on polished wood. Isabella reached for the pole, her body moving with the same fluid grace that had first captivated Solange. But this time, when she spun, it wasn't to impress or to perform, it was an invitation. Solange stepped into her rhythm, her body falling into perfect harmony. They moved together, fire and ice, each feeding the other, each surrendering and claiming at once. The music was in their hearts now, not in the speakers. When they finally stilled, breathless and wrapped in each other's arms, Solange pressed her lips against Isabella's hair. You were right, she whispered. I needed to let go. Isabella tilted her head back, her smile soft and radiant. And I needed you to catch me when I did. There, in the quiet of the studio they had built together, the future stretched before them, not as a plan, not as a spreadsheet, not as a dream half-formed, but as a certainty. They were no longer orbiting, no longer circling. They were one dance, and the fire would never go out. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.